Hey guys, welcome back into another episode of Capturing the Intangibles, where today we discuss how sales strategies are evolving as new technologies and user profiles continuously evolve. Are evaluations the same as they have been? Let's jump in to discuss.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. It's sunny here, summertime in the Netherlands, so we're gonna have sun until 10 o'clock in the night, so that's gonna be good. But I see Mike on a different location. Where are you, Mike?
Yeah, much to the chagrin of our producer, I decided to film with the background of where I'm at for the next month, which is just outside of Portland, Maine. So booked like a little place right outside of the city and decided to get out of Philly for about a month and try and just, enjoy everything that we see back here. And so far, super relaxing, super lovely. And you guys have been jealous every single time I send photos. So that's that added benefit here.
Wow. And so, Rick, how are you doing? And are you jealous to see that background, Mike's background?
I don't know what to think anymore. I'm doing all right, but Mike just looks like he's passed on, and he's just, I don't know if this is heaven or what, but he looks ghostly. But it does look pretty cool in the background, so good for you, Mike.
Listen, no one's here for my face.
Wow. So you're going to be there for a month and then go back to Philly, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Take the 8-hour trip back to Philly once the weather turns and everything, but it's just beautiful out here. Just watch the high and low tides come in and everything.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. That's a good idea.
And Rick, you're currently burrowing into the earth right now, right? You're 20 feet below ground?
Yeah, every week I sink a little bit more into this basement. Eventually, maybe I'll get out. So
wow.
We were talking about how it's artificial light here. That's why the room looks yellow, because there are no windows. Like my soul is just being ripped from me every week. So
hey, at least you got us.
But we're close. Light at the end of the tunnel. I think everyone started to get vaccinated, right? So yeah.
Except for me in Europe, that we are so behind. It's really ridiculous.
Yeah, but you don't count.
Maybe at the end of the May, I'm gonna get my vaccine, but time will tell. I see you have a nice shirt, Braves. I've been, I think, 10 years ago in Atlanta on a baseball game on the Braves against the Red Sox, which I'm more a Red Sox fan. I'm sorry, Rick, than Atlanta Braves, but it was really good.
Call yourself whatever you want, but my Braves aren't doing too hot right now. It's been a rough start to the season. So moving on.
That's another good subject. So, today actually I have different subjects. We don't have one subject. We have different subjects. Like, last time we talked about APIs with Vignes and Vish, which was really great podcast because APIs is really, one of the foundation that you should have in your architecture to create really a composition architecture. But we talked about a lot of data, data architecture and so on, right? So one of the topics, and Mike is there, on this nice location. What I'm seeing more, I was visiting a couple of customers. This week was for me actually back on the road and visiting a couple of customers, still, pay attention on the COVID and the COVID rules. But more and more, what I'm seeing also, Mike, that customers are really taking more and more serious what we call the data architecture, right? They are selecting applications. They're selecting applications, our applications or our competitor applications. But what I'm seeing that the customers are putting not this application at the center of the world, but more as a satellite, and at the center of the world, the center of gravity is the data, right? Are you seeing the same? Are you guys seeing the same as well in your talking to the customers?
Yeah, I mean, it's slow going, but increasingly, I just had a customer call. By the way, actually, let me first say I'm absolutely jealous that you actually are back on the road and actually visiting people and humans again. Mm-hmm. You have no idea. As soon as I got the vaccine, a week or two ago, Rick, I don't know how you were feeling about it, but the first thing I was thinking of was logging into our travel portal to see where I can travel to.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I am seeing a slow transition to customers starting to recognize, for a long time, everyone has concentrated around data warehousing. And I guess taking a step back, people want to be able to make informed decisions about how the business is performing. And for the last 20 years, that answer has been, let's put in a data warehouse. So the intention is there, the strategy is there, and people want to make the best selection, the best pick, and the right technology selection. What this growth and transition over to the cloud has meant is that now the options for solving for your data architecture are both much more vast, complex in some ways, and simple in others. So it's kind of interesting to see, because the first stop that most customers over, let's say 3-4 years ago, when I was first talking to them about these topics like data lakes, was, well, where's my data warehouse? I want to do analytics just like I did before. And really what they're saying is, I need to make decisions based on KPIs, dashboards, pie charts, and whatever. Now what we're seeing is that more and more, I just had a call actually with a healthcare customer and one of their executives, CIO leader. And recently he was actually doing the presentation about what is the complexity behind their data architecture today. They've got 9 different data silos, and they need a single source of truth, a single analytics presentation of that, and so on. And they're talking to each one of these individual vendors, and no one's giving them the right scalable solution for 5 and 10 years from now. They absolutely want to bring in the data to their silo because, those who own the data are king, so it's like controlling the spice trade way back when. But now people are starting to take a second look and think, oh, there's this whole cloud thing. There's so much of these new technologies, data lakes, Redshift, analytical data stores, NoSQL, that's been around a while. Like, what am I not looking at that I should be aware of before I make a decision to just jump in and stand up, a database in the cloud and do data warehousing like I did 20 years ago? It's faster, it's cheaper than it was 20 years ago, but it's still the same technology. So more and more, it's not every day, but more and more, I'm actually seeing that gradually more executives especially are starting to wonder, how do we pick a strategy for data for the next 10 to 20 years that we can grow and expand, rather than just bringing and lifting and shifting, on-prem up and into the cloud. Very long run-on sentence, but, from cradle to grave, I think it's really, really valuable to look at it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rick, you have been busy with AI already for years, even if it is a new space, you're already busy for, I think, at least 5 years, right? So is AI making people thinking more about the data architecture being the center of the world, or is there anything else going on there?
Yeah, just listening to the way Mike was talking about from the technology side and the options and the choice and how customers are looking at it differently now, I was actually thinking about it even from the business scenario, how our team, even this past week, you're aware of some of like these customer spotlights that we're working on the analytics and ML side, which is, by the way, completely derived on everything Mike just said. It's a foundation for that. But we're seeing really analytics not just being something that informs and it kind of sits on the side and kind of thought of as like a pure play type thing. We're actually seeing it become a part of the business practice and execution. So it's not as if analytics is just this thing, right? No, it's a part of your entire business process. So I think that's what you're seeing companies move towards, is how can I execute things through my analytics rather than having analytics and then come over here and execute, But if you think in that term, it's really your entire business and process is built on top of data and analytics, right? You have these corresponding services behind the scenes that tap into different systems to execute that, but everything's kind of guardrailed through that analytics experience, I think. So we're seeing that a ton, and that's why we're seeing the pickup on the ML side, because once you change the experience of how you're executing different types of work, well, then users start to trust the mathematics behind, okay, I'm seeing these analytics and I can start to trust it a little bit more because I'm doing everything through that facet, through that lens, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, guys, the way I see it, that even application vendors don't see it, but the battle is about data supremacy, not application supremacy, but data supremacy. Who wins the battle on data will win the next battle for the 10 years, right? So, and have a competitive advantage, right? So an application becomes almost a commodity that you need to have to generate the data, but the guys that have, figured out, the data supremacy and have a very good platform for that and architecture, that will win, right? So that's actually what I believe that will be important. But let's say that if data supremacy is going to be the next big thing, right? Who wants the data? Who wins the battle to sell data, right? So if you have if you have a sales force that is used to sell applications, or maybe in a platform technologies, but now you have to sell data, the advantage of data. What does that mean, right? From a sales perspective, how do you sell that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just like any IP-driven industry, right? So a lot of companies out there, they closely guard their IP, what makes them special, and what they do is they gather data about their particular industry, they add their secret sauce, they apply certain decision-making components to it, or algorithms or pivot tables. It doesn't even have to be super fancy, but ultimately then they go out and they sell that expertise, and part of that portfolio is information. Now, when we think about data systems, then it's hardcore data that you find in data lakes, data warehouses, and your data silos, and so on. But it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about last week with Vignesh, where there's this burgeoning API economy, this cottage industry. So as a result of everyone trying to service everything or create services out of everything, this little economy has popped up where now people are taking these services that they built out and selling them to other people, right? And then the same thing is going to happen with data. So you already have that for the last, 100 years. You have data aggregators and brokers that sell highly specific things like, railcar, in the railcar industry. When I used to work in the natural gas industry, we bought information and reports on where every single rail car and ship was in the world to figure out exactly how to optimize where we need to make our shipments and do that, right? That is not something new. But what is new is the ability for now companies to start aggregating and tapping into that themselves, being able to use that data to drive their own optimization processing. But also, increasingly, we're going to start seeing that these companies are actually going to go out to the market and say, actually, we built out a whole practice around data that drives our business. Let's add some secret sauce to it, put a nice UI on it, and sell that back into the market. Because now that's a new growth factor for actually expanding and diversifying the business beyond just something like, manufacturing or healthcare or whatever. They can actually become data brokers in the data that they're actually aggregating and conglomerating. So that's actually pretty interesting. And it's going to be an interesting 10 years.
Absolutely. I agree, Mike. And Rick, we talked about consumer versus B2B, right? That, as consumer technologies and trends are much farther than in the B2B. So if you have a sales force today that can sell applications, and now all of a sudden they have to sell value of data, and of course the technologies behind that, what kind of sales force do you need for that, right? Do we need to take people for that, sell ads or sell data, like Mike was saying in certain industry, or we need different things?
I think you need a much more creative sales force for sure. Because it's not as if you're selling one thing per se. Like data is a very abstract thing when you're talking to users. It's kind of like in the commercial space, users don't think about when I'm using Instagram or whatever, or I get recommendations or suggestions. Users don't think about how that's derived or how does that work, right? So in the enterprise world, I tend to always think about, are we moving down a direction to where it's going to be more like that experience? The expectation is going to change. The buyer profile is going to change to something that's a younger demographic, and the expectations change. But guess what? We know on the technology side, the only way to create those experiences is through the data, not necessarily a monolith application. So the profile of selling that is more of a, how do you sell how you want to work to a newer generation? And it's very abstract. I think sales is very tactically used to selling, here's my widget, here's what I'm selling, right? When really it's, well, this widget can be a whole lot of things, right? It's got the ability to let you create it into a way that, so it's tough. Like it's abstract. I get that, but that's why it takes a very creative, willing workforce to actually learn how to take something abstract as like a data architecture and put it out into the workforce. But It's an absolute necessity. Absolute necessity.
Yeah.
It's a love letter to Joe Pasquaretta, isn't it, Rick?
Always. Everything's a love letter to Joe.
We'll ask Joe on that. But I do agree. I mean, if the trend is that all these companies that build apps and technologies around, business processes, they generate a lot of data. And if the shift is to data supremacy, then you need to have a sales force that will sell the value of data, right? So otherwise, you're not going to differentiate. In your PO system or your opportunity system is just the other one, right? It's just an opportunity is an opportunity, or a PO is a PO, a sales order is a sales order, right? But I believe, and I think Mike was also alluding to that, when you combine the data together, you have this cross insights, then is where things are becoming very interesting, right? And that is where the industry hasn't really figured it out yet, even if people claim that to do that, but still we are at the infancies of these cross connections. And the ones that makes that happen and can sell it, packaging and selling and pitch it and show it, I think they will have the next big, next that gen differentiation in the next years.
So I want to give actually a more tangible example, because I think, I'm completely aligned with you guys, but I think also some of the people listening, they hear this, but they understand it, but they don't necessarily know how to map that to reality. And I think maybe a good tangible example is actually something that happened at Target a few years ago. That's probably going on 10 years ago now, but I don't know if you read Target, which is a sort of department store in the US that's nationwide, sort of a Walmart competitor. There was a lot of outrage about 10 years ago because it turns out that this father started receiving circulars, these newspaper clippings directly from Target, and it was trying to sell them baby clothes, baby items, and so on. And he got a little outraged because his very young daughter, under 18 daughter, was being targeted as part of these circulars. And he was saying, this is completely out of line. This is unreasonable. And they said, look, we'll take a look into it. And what ended up being was that based on certain things that she was already buying, they had built up a demographic profile based on things like vitamin purchases and so on, that they anticipated that she was already pregnant, right? And so before the father even knew, Target was already targeting this young woman for things that are going to make it easier to become a new parent, right? And so it turned out that demographic data, I mean, that's the worst kind of example that you would ever want to see. You don't want that kind of notoriety, but you can also see that the amount of data or the wealth of information that you find within data itself and the trends that you can start to correlate can start to enrich the business. Now, that's an example that blew up in their face, absolutely. But what we see is that there's a lot of power in being able to understand and create demographics and map patterns of behaviors to those demographics. And then, they used it for their own purposes, distributing circulars to try and generate more revenue per customer. But in other cases, there are other companies that are generating reports and new types of services and selling that out in the same way that utilizes their experience. So, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the power and also the dangerous side of data sometimes too. You have to think about, not only how to be creative with it, but also what is your responsibility in terms of how you actually harness that data.
Yeah. And do you think that, I don't think in the B2B, but in the consumer side, you say, hey, you were buying data, right? So there are agency collecting data, aggregating data, and then you will buy data, right? So there is a business behind. In the B2B, maybe you won't buy data from a customer, but you buy more anonymized data that takes insights from an industry perspective. That will be actually very important to, if you have those insights, and you can, you can back it up like with real data, anonymized, of course, with the compliant, then it's gonna be a very competitive advantage, right? So, but I see still a lot of, like 10 years ago, like you say, tactical rig, not a widget, but even, a transactional engine, go from one deal to one other deal, but not really taking from a very strategic point, and not understanding these trends and technologies, how they can be utilized, and they just maybe look down like, yeah, it's an evil thing that we have to have these technologies. That really poses a lot of sales force, almost out of business in at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that's going to continue to be questioned, I think, but it's just like with everything. I'm sure it's kind of like when, Mike, you've given the example of e-commerce, right? Is when everything went down that path. And we made the example of how people went and built their own infrastructures to do something like that. And now it's just a managed service. It's a progression of everything. And I'm sure that all these mom and pop stores, whenever e-commerce came around, they said, I don't need this. Like this, my bread and butter is in how I'm able to interact with people, which is still true to some types of stores today, right? But it's something that's inevitable. And it's inevitable because it's in human nature to want to accept the ease of use of things, right? And it's going to be no different, especially as I keep talking about the workforce. The buying profile for B2B software will eventually be the profile of a person who's used to using this for their entire life.
Exactly.
Right? That's going to fundamentally change. Why do you think we're seeing so many smaller companies pop up right now that are starting to get used? Like Nunzio likes Zoho, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a company that's even starting to be used in big business, even though it wasn't necessarily, to my knowledge, designed for that at first. That wasn't their target market. But because of its ease of use and ease and ability to plug and play and do the basics, but then have the ability to do things on the go and not be tethered to one specific process, that's gaining a lot of traction, right? And we're not just talking about stakeholder value, as you like to call it, Massimo. We're talking about customer value.
Exactly.
And so I don't think that's going to change. But the staple of all of that is that the IP is going to be in the data, not necessarily how when you execute or use your different systems.
So I'm kind of curious then, bringing it back around, because I think you're pulling on an interesting thread, Massimo, and I'm not sure if this is you were dancing around it or what. But actually, it's interesting. So you have this new wave and new generation of technology tools, software services, and so on. But you keep bringing up Salesforce and salespeople.
Yeah.
We have an entire 3 generations of salespeople out there in the field, people that are in their 20s, coming out of university, learning the new technologies and going out and selling these newer things. You have people that have a lot of experience in enterprise manufacturing, healthcare, running back office, and so on. They're specialists and so on. So for a lot of what we're talking about with these business composition platforms, these technologies that drive a new agile approach in sort of a business context, what do? You have a sales force out there. Do you train them? Do you try and ramp up the onboarding of a new generation of technology enthusiasts and then try and teach them the ways of ERP and everything? Like, how do you solve for that knowledge gap in the Salesforce as it exists today with the technologies that product teams are actually delivering into the market? I mean, there is a chasm there, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think every software company have the dilemma of they innovate a lot and the Salesforce team doesn't keep up to say, oh, we don't know what to do with it, right? It's too complicated. We need, a very simplified message, simplified positioning, simplified pricing. Well, there is a lot of innovation, right? So, how do you deal with that? Because you can keep training people, but when I say, I always talk, even to my kids, I say, when there is a communication, there is a sender and a receiver, right? So you can keep training, but the receiver needs also to be open to change and to, embrace the new world, right? So if you are not open to new things, either if you're in sales and pre-sales or even in development, then nothing is going to change, So I think that the next generation Salesforce and leaders are going to be more techie safe. They have to be more techie safe. You cannot go around it at all right? So you can dumb down the message like, in 3 words, what your nice framework or nice technology or nice application can do. But then you really if I say that a Ferrari, a nice latest Ferrari model, is a car with 4 wheels, yeah, you're not describing that's a Ferrari, right? Or it's a Porsche. There is a lot of value on this. That is a car with 4 wheels. And most of the time, what you hear from salespeople, it says, no, I want a message that says it's a car with 4 wheels. Yeah, I'm sorry. That exists so many brands and so many versions of it. You're not differentiating at all on the things. If you have a Ferrari, you have a Ferrari. You have to talk about why is it a Ferrari and not another just a regular car. So that dumbed down to something simple is very, very dangerous, right? So, and if you have a sales force that just understand a little bit how to pitch the Ferrari versus the Ford, the regular Ford, that is where you're going to win, because they just can go a little bit more to talk about the technology, the data supremacy, and why data is more important than just say, this system has a PO system. You can enter some POs. Yeah, you can do with, 10 ERPs with that. Right. So that's what I really hope that will change, will come. And the companies that can just have a little bit more techie savvy sales force will win the battle. At the end of the day, you got technology, you got to sell it. You can't hide it.
How are you fixing this, Rick?
Well, I probably have an unpopular opinion here. And that is, to answer your question, Mike, I don't know if it can be taught or if that gap can be closed. And I don't mean to sound so negative on that. It's just that the way it works, look at the traditional CIO profiles today. We know for a fact that it's a risk averse position because you're making a decision that defines your career. How many times have you changed your ERP? You're doing that once. If it goes bad, it's really bad for you. If it goes great, great. My career's set, right? So that fundamentally makes you risk averse. From a sales perspective, I can then understand I'm going in trying to give exactly what that customer wants. But in the technology and software space, you always have to be thinking of what's next. So in my opinion, the perfect profile and the perfect skill set to be able to go out and sell these sort of technologies and solutions is simply the people that are passionate about technology, period. It's not something that can be necessarily taught and it doesn't matter about age, demographic. If you're passionate about solving a particular solution in a creative way or in a new way or in a way that I can have more data insights, I can be faster with it, I can eliminate issues, whatever it may be. That's what's going to sell, because that individual then possesses the skills to change that mindset of that CIO to not be so risk averse, but also willing to take a step that's going to differentiate them moving forward. That's really at least the profile that I'm kind of looking for across all of our teams is, can you hold your ground and have a passionate debate and opinion about why technology can be transformational to your organization?
So can I ask, in a given group of a randomly selected group of 100 candidates, because I don't disagree. I actually think that's a really, really good nuanced point, Rick. In a group or a pool of, let's say, 100 candidates, how many would actually fit that kind of role that's very well spoken, that understands how to appeal to problem solving while also being able to kind of nudge people in the direction of embracing innovation? Is this something that we should expect out of people coming out of university and right off the street, or, with this background? Or is this sort of a unicorn type of employee that you kind of very rarely come across, in data hiring profiles?
I think I actually agree with Rick. I think you probably don't learn it. Yeah, you will get some theory at school or university. I think it's all about attitude. If you want to learn, and if you follow up, you follow through, you learn, you really, you want to learn and open-minded, you learn, and you then, even if you don't know now, you will know later, but then and you work with your customer and you follow through, you help, and then you follow through until, the very end, or it's even an ongoing process. Those are the people you need. You need a motivated, passionate people that want to learn and they're open, and there is no age or there is no university that can learn that. It's almost like something built in. So if I have to select 10 people, even if I have the most experienced salesperson or development or engineer in front of me, I'm looking first for motivation and passion to learn. That's the first thing I'm looking. And if I see someone that has 20 years experience, but is a very inflexible, doesn't want to change and not open and doesn't want to learn, that's not going to happen, in my selection. It's not going to, the person is not going to make the selection at all.
I don't want to categorize it as a unicorn, because one thing I want to be clear about, when I say passionate about tech, that does not necessarily mean overly technical.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys get where I'm going there with that subtle difference. You do not have to be an engineer to be passionate about tech and be able to sell technology as a result.
Exactly.
What it takes is an inquisition to say, hey, what if we could do things this way, right? So you could argue maybe it's just the evolution of the demographics of individuals, but it does take a certain personality that, of course, is outgoing, willingness to be wrong, all these great things. But I will say, back to the original point, my experience, I could be 100% wrong. The best experience that I've had with any sales experience is when it feels as if it is not a sales experience.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean by that? Like if you can go in somewhere and have a debate about something and be convinced one way or another through that organic conversation, that's the best selling experience. I can pick up immediately in all the partners, everything that we work in, immediately when it just feels like, you're trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
Right. But instead, if you see that sort of passion about the actual context of what you are selling, that goes so much further than trying to sell it itself.
15 minutes of good, passionate, and in 50 minutes you're sold. Even if you're still presenting for the next hour, 50 minutes, the other side is already sold. That's what people want to see. Are you that kind of person? And you actually talked about fear. That's actually one of the things I'm seeing also a lot in a lot of corporations. And when I started career, I started with BAN, which back then in the 90s was one of the top ERP. Actually, we were on the Magic Quadrant on the leaders, beating up Oracle and SAP, which I was very proud, as we were very proud at BAN as well. One of the things that I really love at BAN, aside of innovation, it was really from the top said, don't be afraid to make a decision and don't be afraid to innovate. That don't be afraid to innovate, I really liked it, because when I started at young, maybe a lot of people that starts are really afraid, like, hey, what if I make a mistake? And that could cause, problem with my careers. But back, fast forward in the 25 years, I'm seeing more that the companies have brought up people that are really afraid to say something or to do something or to make decisions or to make even innovation. And of course, in a lot of things that I've done in my career, probably in your career, we are not perfect. We make very good decisions. We have made bad decisions. And the thing is, the trick is, even if you make decision, just fix them. Fail as fast as possible and fix it, right? And throughout Salesforce or other roles, there is a lot of fear. And because of that, you see people going on a standard gear. We have manual gears in Europe. So you just, go, standard 4 or 3 or 4 gear, and you just don't dare to go the extra mile or to do, to go on the 5th or the 6th gears because it's not needed. I don't take that risk, right? So risk averse as well. So do you guys feel in your work and your career ever felt fear to make decisions or fear to do something or to undertake something that was, this could be, very tricky? Mike, maybe your perspective on that?
I have to say, so I know what you're talking about, but I think we kind of have the luxury being in the team that we work on, in the group and field that we work in, that we chase crazy, silly ideas or stupid ideas sometimes, but nothing bad's ever come of it. In fact, we actually learned new things about what we should have done better, what we should have done as a strategy. I'm not going to name products right now, but there was one engagement or initiative that we launched a couple of years ago. I'm glad that we did it, right? Around connected devices, that sort of thing, right? And I think it was really, really good because we started building out really complex and interesting technologies like rules engines and so on. And we start to see a lot of this technology being co-opted into other areas. Hey, were we absolutely successful? No, but we failed, and we failed quickly, like you said. So did anyone get, punished for it? No, we're all still here, and we're figuring out how to build better software and improve things and refocus and realize, all right, maybe this wasn't the best implementation, or maybe, maybe this is not a market fit that we want to do. But at the same time, we do have a lot of that flexibility. Yeah, we've got deadlines and everything, but I got to say, we're a pretty lucky team, I think, when it comes to it. But at the same time, I also have friends that do have that issue, Massimo.
Okay.
Where they actually do have ideas. They have backgrounds in Six Sigma, process improvement, and so on. But they're constrained by hierarchy and discomfort that this is either going to make my boss look bad, or this is going to create way more noise, or their bosses will say, no, don't bring that up because I don't want you to do this. You don't know about what's going on over here. And it really just stifles sort of creative innovation. Oftentimes, I think you tend to see people kind of leave organizations for that reason. But you know what? I got to say, I've been lucky enough not to have that in my own personal career.
Yeah, and to be honest, if something doesn't go through for whatever reason, I think it's always very important to explain why, why there is a choice. And maybe at that moment, the choice was not correct, but most of the time people just say no, or we don't do this, but there is no really the desire to tell also why is it, why we make the decision. So I think it's important also for leaders to say why this decision now is not made and we're making another decision. And many times they just say, okay, yes or no, right? So, but then, you get stuck. You think that you're going to get done it maybe in 6 months, and then people get disillusioned and leave the organizations, right? So, Rick, how do you see that? Have you ever felt, in your career, here or outside, that, I can do my things, I can go and execute, don't feel, I feel supported, I would say.
Yeah, from a personal perspective, for the most part, yes. But just culturally speaking, like Massimo, you and I have had opportunities in the past and had conversations about, hey, if we went down a CIO type path, right? What would our decision making be? Because it's actually helped guide us how we have developed it's been some good conversation.
Yeah.
But I will say the further I've gotten along in my career, the more ambitious and demanding I have gotten. But it's because I've realized, I don't know if it's personal to me. I'm so much more driven by the pursuit and the journey. That sounds cliche, but literally the constant battle to get better. It's like any sort of like sports figure out there, right? Every day they want to get better at their craft. I literally think of my work that way too. Like every day, how can we make sure that we're performing better? And in our world, it's how does the technology get better? How do we make the experience better? How do we slightly tweak how we go to market to influence something? That it's that pursuit it never stops. And sometimes that ambition gets misconstrued as being difficult. And that's probably the one thing that almost breaks your heart, because that's one thing that we must as people not push people down a path that says ambition and creativity is wrong. I will say, that has happened to me over the years, right? And I don't know if it's just a change in how everything's happening. We're talking about how CIOs might be changing their purchasing habits and how software might be used differently. But I think it's all the same, right? I think it's the ability to express and give people the tools to get the most out of their daily work, period, is all you can ask for, because that's the only way you're going to reach your limit is by every single individual having the opportunity to do what they think is best, because they may be wrong, but eventually the rule states that if we have that wrong, we're going to eventually get it right with the right person. But every single person needs to be given that ability to do the most, and quit giving so many rules and standards. It's always been done this way. We can't handle that. The system doesn't account for it. That's all bullshit,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just it's a terrible answer. So it's like you asked me this on purpose because you know I'm really passionate about
I
this.
know.
Like I fundamentally believe that everyone should be given every opportunity. I don't care how much experience you have. If you come in with zero experience and you're questioning, hey, well, what if we could do something this way? Give that individual that opportunity to test that out.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the worst thing that happens is, unfortunately, I would argue that's why we go to some commercial sites where green screens are still there. That's why that happens.
Exactly.
Right? Is because you pigeonhole people into this standard that you feel that they have to adhere to, and it's crap. It's absolute crap.
Absolutely.
But that's why the way we architect systems now is give everyone the most choice so that they can do that. But selling that is apparently really difficult, which is also frustrating.
Yeah, and the culture, I mean, look at the announcement that Apple did with the chip M1, right? And then they did, they said, well, this is going to outperform Intel. Then they really tested and they figured it out. Whoa, this M1 chip, Intel is years behind, with ARM architecture. And what I'm seeing, looking at, we don't work at Intel, but looking, reading a lot of articles on the internet, Intel really has this frozen culture, old mentality from the sales force, from the engineering, just keeping going with the same, innovation. And a year ago, Apple comes with a new chip architecture with Qualcomm on ARM. And these guys are almost obsolete. A huge company, almost obsolete, right? And that's probably because internally, they probably have people say, hey, we should do an ARM chipset. And new people with perspective. But they should be shut down by people saying, no, you don't understand what we're doing. We just continue like this, right? It's just a new Blockbuster almost, or a new Kodak almost, happening there. And I'm amazed, like a company like Intel is really going down like that, and they're not even coming with an ARM chipset in a few years. Unbelievable, right? So this is the things that it's not because maybe they don't have the product, vision in a way that they have people that they can design an ARM chipset. Of course they have. It's just because the whole company just doesn't work in this way. They don't move in that way, right? So that's what I keep saying, that is very, very important, the culture, and not be afraid to innovate, empower the people to make decisions. And then if you fail, they'll fail quickly and recover as quick as possible and move on, right? So that's actually in the time of ban, they were telling us, you don't have a vision. You have just failed 5 times or 10 times, and now you know what to do. And that's your vision. That's what at the ban time they were telling us. People that says they have a vision, probably they already have failed a couple of times and they learned it already how to do it now, right? It's just how faster you fail and recover. That's the trick. How many times Steve Jobs failed? Apple has a huge number of failed projects as well. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah, they fired him once, right?
Yeah, so nobody talks about that, but that's the way he had a vision, right? So that's the thing, right? So these new companies, the way we're gonna go in 5 years, we need to have that culture. That's gonna be very important.
I gotta say, Intel's a pretty interesting example. I'm doing this podcast right now on a M1 MacBook Pro. Probably should have gone for the air, but I am so thrilled with this machine. Like, I've done a lot of reading into it, and it's absolutely incredible, the whole ARM architecture.
Yeah.
And when you start to look into, like, RISC architectures and CISC architectures, like, ARM is not supposed to perform like this. It's supposed to be low power, low energy, low performance. What ARM is doing, and actually what they're about to do in the 2022 model, is going to be absolutely insane. But the thing is, for everything exciting that's coming out of, let's say, Apple right now with ARM. And by the way, Microsoft's going to be investing in ARM too, their own chipsets for the Surface Books in the future, and so on. But the answer to everything that's been going on in the last 9 months since they released the M1 is to release a commercial with Justin Long. You remember I'm a Mac
I saw
guy.
that.
Yeah,
I saw that.
And talk about dongles and talk about just inane nonsense that is completely misdirecting. And so it has nothing to do with how exciting what Mac is doing or what Apple is doing with the Mac. It's about, we can fold this up and then you have to use dongles with the MacBook. Oh, you have a tablet and an all-in-one. Oh, you need a MacBook, an iPad, and so on. And so it's a very, very, it almost seems like a very desperate marketing move. Which
exactly
to those that kind of watch this, and I wonder how people that are more casual, computer users kind of perceive this, but to more people that keep in touch with this, it almost feels desperate and it feels a little sad, and,
it is.
And you see that. And I love using Microsoft's tools, Windows, and machines. I have plenty of them. I have, I'm personally using a Mac right now, but coming from this more objective, like not a fanboy one or the other, I have to say that the marketing behind that is not the right answer to try and, take someone down a peg for them being innovative, right? That's the wrong approach to take.
Absolutely. And Rick, on the culture, I mean, we talked about philosophically, hey, what we should do in the next 5 years, maybe CIO, becoming a CIO or a C-level, in a software company or not. So we're talking about, many times as well. But lately, what I'm seeing also especially in tech companies, the HR role is actually very, very distinct and separated. You have all the talents with the managers and the talents pool, and then you have HR with the rules. But I think more even not only the next leaders in tech in software company or companies, even just normal companies in the business are more tech savvy. But I believe also in the HR space, we need also a little more people that have experience how to manage talent in the real world, because then you can help the manager to change that culture, not by rules, by regulations and by policies, but really giving, real good feedback how to change things in the next gen, wave of technology, of innovation, right? So that will be a good things to see. But probably we're going to discuss this in the next podcast, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I seem to, the best leaders for an entire company are those that I don't care your function. You all share in the common ambition of what you're doing as a company.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I fundamentally, and this is also a not popular belief, I don't believe you can take a marketing person from a particular industry and say, oh, they've done really well here. Let's bring in someone outside because they've got such a good track record of marketing and put them into this company, because you immediately break that connection and that feeling of what that organization and company does. Mm-hmm. Everything needs to be about the ambition behind your product, in my opinion.
Exactly.
I don't know if I agree, actually, because you see so many examples of people coming from different industries, different verticals, kind of entering C-suites and kind of reinvigorating some channels. It might be marketing, it might be executive office and that sort of thing. But I think, didn't Ford do a little bit of shaking up in recent years? A couple of companies were hiring automobile executives into the food industry and so on. And it's this diverse set of knowledge and experience. I think it can go really, really well. I do think that probably is more of an exceptional case than what you're saying, Rick. But
if I said experience, I didn't mean that. I said passion.
That I agree
so,
with.
for instance, when I went and joined TrackMan, right? Did I have any experience in radar technology? I've got a little bit of background in engineering in that side. I knew enough about the physics but I was asked to come lead a particular area of their business. I joined it because I was passionate about that product, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think that's what you're seeing too. You're not going to hire someone from a food and bev to go to Ford unless they're absolutely so passionate and they have that fire about the Ford brand, those cars. They've got some kind of feeling and connectivity, because ultimately that person has to sell their feeling to everyone else.
Exactly.
That's where it all starts.
That I agree with.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, you saw also the CEO of Ferrari, which is now gone. He came from Philip Morris, and he was like, yeah, making cigarettes is the same making cars. Yeah, no, absolutely no. In Italy, it was really a huge discussion about, no, making cigarettes is not like making a car. And that passion you have to have, not beyond, if you have some understanding, even better, but at least, that passion, right? So, but maybe we will discuss that next time. So guys, thank you very much for joining me and being together today with this podcast. Mike, enjoying your nice house there.
Yeah.
Remember to keep, to subscribe to the channel and give us some comments and suggestion on what topics you like us to discuss. We can discuss, or we can bring some friends and experts also to enrich the discussion. And until then, stay safe, and see you next time.
See you guys.